First, I just want to thank Bill and Ray for being here with us today and to celebrate with us and to talk about the work. We talked about how, when could we get Bill and Ray together on the stage for San Antonio, and no time was better than the present. They are often together in different places, but San Antonio is the only one that can say, our founder is here, our president is here, and our president alumni is here. And so our alum is here. And so we are grateful, and we are going to boast about that opportunity to be able to do that. And so usually we start with a little bit of an intro of a bio, but you can read all about Bill and Ray from a bio perspective in the program, and I really would encourage you to do that at some point, because there are two great people that have really done amazing things in their life so far. And so we really want you to get to know Bill and Ray from a conversation and less from a paper and a bio. And so I'm going to start with Ray. And I have a couple of questions, and so this is really a lot of pressure because I'm always trying to think of which story do we want Bill to talk about, or what do we want to do, and so trying to come up with all the different questions to bring that out was a little challenging. But Ray, please help our supporters learn about who Bill is, and tell us what inspires you about Bill.
Now you're in for it, Bill. So Bill and I,
remember, we can fire you.
He's also my boss. He's also my boss. Vice chair of our national board. I just can't get rid of him. We spend a lot of time with each other, so we're going to let you in on kind of the conversations that we have. But there's really just a love between the two of us, and I never would have thought to myself that I'd get the chance to be with Bill sitting on this stage here in San Antonio, leading an organization that I benefited from as a graduate of South San High School down on the south side of San Antonio. And I get now the chance to tell you a little bit about Bill. So this organization is 47 years old, and when this was just an idea in Bill's head, it was a different type of Bill up here. Bill, you look at him and he looks, refined and sophisticated, never skips a beat. The one thing you should note about him is his hair is still over his ears, but in the mid-70s, it was down to his shoulders. And he grew up in the movement. Oh, can you still hear me?
Now you can.
He grew up in this movement of really identifying issues around civil rights, justice, protest. And so there was turmoil, young people out in the streets looking for equal rights, looking for ways to fight, to bring voice to the voiceless. And so Bill was in the midst of that, as he was also saying, at the same time, we've got to start thinking about the next generation. And when he started CIS, which before it was communities in schools, it was cities in schools. Before it was cities in schools, we were street academies. Thank you. We were street academies, and all of that started with 100 students on the third floor of a department store in Atlanta, Georgia, about 47 years ago. So now, fast forward, and I get to introduce Bill, who's been part of this movement, less an organization and more a movement of how you support students inside schools as partners with public education. We're not creating a new school or a new system. We want to partner with existing schools. We're now serving not 100 students, but 2 million students all across the country, not in just one school, but 3,700. Please give it up for Bill Milliken, whose vision for this work allowed us to do this. So that's Bill, and he's got a little less hair than he used to, but not because, he's got a great head of hair, but he's still the rabble-rouser, always pushing us at the board meeting to think, move, and get this organization to where it needs to be.
So, Bill, the thing about the picture I'm not sure if they're going to put, when they put it up, it's not just about the length of the hair. The color of the hair is very different in that picture. So tell us a little bit about, you go back and you can kind of get, you know, you have the memories of how things started. Tell us a little bit about the origins of CIS Texas. And I know San Antonio then came in after that, but tell us about how that, your story behind that.
By the way, I'm not going to fire him. He said so many nice things about me. Actually, my wife of 59 years is here. She was one of the first Episcopal priests, and she also has a doctorate in pastoral therapy because living with me, she has to be really close to God. She was working for an organization called Faith at Work. Some folks here know about it with some people, Bruce Larson and Keith Miller and folks. And she met Heidi Frost, who worked for them. She worked for her. She fell in love. This was in New York with a widower in Houston. This was all a strategic plan. So he hears about us, Judge Wyatt Hurd, and we had one program at that time, and that was Atlanta, Georgia. So he invited us down and said, took us, one of the kids I'd worked with on the streets of Harlem was with me that now was working with us. And he said, I want you to keep kids out of my courtroom. That's why I want CIS. I hate having to put them away. I hear you know how to keep them from getting to me. He put together a board, and I happened to be Mark White was on it, but he was an attorney. I guess he was a lawyer, and built a wonderful board for the first CIS in Houston. And San Antonio came next, some years after that, because Linda Gale decided to make Linda Gale White CIS the #1. And Henry Cisneros, I got to come down and meet with them, and it got it off the off and going. So it's a lot of years.
Yeah, so Governor White was very instrumental, but Linda Gale White was really the one who made this the kind of the education initiative as Governor White. And I think San Antonio was like was part of the first replication in Texas?
It was #3 after Atlanta, Houston, and then here. And now it's #1 in the country.
I agree. I think a lot of the part that I hear from your stories, Bill, all the time is it always stems from a relationship. It always stems from someone having a relationship with someone and then them connecting from that relationship, the same heart for kids and heart for youth. And that happened with Jean in this effort as well. And I honestly had heard some of that story before, and we were in the car this week driving to Uvalde, and I was like, I did not know the part of the judge. And so the rest of the story came to me. I heard that the rest of the story this week. So because of those relationship building, because of that effort, CIS ended up in San Antonio. And so Ray, you ended up having the ability to have the support of CIS then, because we were here then when you were in high school. So tell us a little bit kind of that journey, and as a former student, now an alum.
Well, first of all, let me test. Can you all hear me okay in every corner? Perfect.
Same here.
Well, if you imagine, you heard a little bit about Electra's story and the way that she was able to find a caring adult. If you remember nothing about if this is your first time, and I know many of you, this is not your first time being exposed to communities and schools, but if you want to go with a takeaway about what this work is, it is Electra. And you think about wanting to support an organization and maybe contribute to it, you want to find out how do you get the help you need to somebody like Electra in a way that is sustainable and has deep impact. That is through our vehicle, which is our site coordinators, and you got to meet our site coordinator. There's close to 300 of them throughout San Antonio. But one in particular that I like to embarrass every time I'm here is Mrs. Reyes. Mrs. Reyes, I see you right here. She is my site coordinator. If you please, And even she's probably scratching her head because she's like, I'm not Mrs. Reyes anymore. I'm Miss Gradia because I got married. But in our mind, as young people, you'll never change because that's the amazing thing about what happens as young people who are looking for something. And of course, the first thing we're looking when we're trying to find and identify what's next in life, there's struggles that I'm trying to get around, is who's somebody I can trust with something that I'm holding on to. And so Mrs. Reyes was a person who I met as a sophomore at South San. And it was, for me and many other students, we're all born, this is universal, this goes for everybody sitting in the room today, we're all born into somebody else's story. And the story I was born into was a story where, I had a father who was undocumented for most of my educational career, became a citizen in '99. I remember thinking and feeling a certain way about what that meant for me, what that may have mean for my future, what I could talk about, what I couldn't, and the kinds of trusting relationships I could really confide in. It's in the same way that many of the students that we work with are born into other stories. And San Antonio is the kind of community that if you think about how do you get to the students who need our support the most, then you really have to think about the visionary leadership to say, if you have an effective strategy that works with students, that focuses on relationships, go where you can find them, go inside schools. And I know we have superintendents here, so that superintendents who open their doors and allow us to work in, that was the superintendent at South San who allowed Mrs. Reyes and other staff to be inside schools. And we were just sharing tamales that my mother made at my home yesterday with Bill. And Bill was asking, tell me some stories about Ray growing up, because he wanted the goods to share with the board. But one of the topics that came up was just this conversation around how difficult it is to imagine a future when you're born into a story and you start to tell yourself a similar story about what you can and can't do. And I know that it was Mrs. Reyes at the time who was telling me that she saw something in me, she saw potential, and she had me apply to a school that I had never heard about, but she said these two twins applied to this school called Stanford in California, and you should think about doing it too. Those twins are Julian and Joaquin, and I didn't even know Stanford existed, but oh my gosh, that's why people are, oh, there's a photo of me that I hope doesn't make it to the screen.
We'll be praying.
That's me, that's me. But I know that it was Mrs. Reyes who not only encouraged me to apply, helped me pay for the college application fees, and helped me with my writing, but the idea of like getting into Stanford was a big deal, but not for my mom. I was reminded about this yesterday when she found out that it was several states away and that I was her mijito and that I would be leaving. And if it wasn't for CIS setting up a program at Our Lady of the Lake over the summer that allowed me to experience what would have been college-like, so Monday through Friday I would go away and stay away from home, which my mom was like, okay, this is like a trial run. That was CIS. And I trusted Mrs. Reyes as somebody who I could believe in because she believed in me before I knew what my story could be. And if you remember nothing else, that's the work of communities and schools. It's our site coordinators. It's the trusting relationship. And that's my story. And quick personal privilege. It's usually Bill that goes on and on. I'm actually feel like I'm going on.
Praise the Lord.
The way that I became CEO of CIS is a story that starts here on this stage. It was about 6 or 7 years ago that I was invited to come speak as an alumni, and Barbara and Wayne Alexander are here. Barbara, Wayne, thank you for inviting me to come and share. Longtime friends of communities and schools. They asked me to come and share the story of who I was and what CIS meant to me, and that got the attention of our CEO at the time. He invited me to speak at the board of directors meeting at the national office, intimidating people like Bill, told my story there, and I think left an impression. They invited me to be on the national board, and then when our CEO retired about 5 years ago, again, all that imposter syndrome came to me, and they said, you know, you should think about doing it as well. So Bill, thank you for, at a time that, again, I didn't believe in myself, I had to have someone else believe in me. Bill said, you know what, you're made for this, you should take it on. But he didn't tell me that March 1st, 2020 would be the worst time to take on a new job. And that was 4 years ago, so sorry for being a little long-winded.
No.
That's my CIS.
Well, what's funny yesterday is we had at Ray's parents' home, and Bill was like, oh, Palo Alto is literally around the corner, and you chose the further Palo Alto. And so Ray talked about his mom wishing he would have picked at the time, wishing he would have picked the 2 blocks away Palo Alto.
Palo Alto's here.
So Ray, Bill, Ray talked about the hope that Gladys gave him, and we always use your words that are actions about giving hope. It is part of our vernacular in CIS of San Antonio, and we absolutely talk about it. So talk about the story around why that has always been a phrase that you talk about. And I say a phrase, but I know it's action. And so tell us that history of hope.
Well, I had given up on life by 17. I thumbed all over the country. I'd been on my own. I felt worthless. I'd been kicked out of school. I had no hope. And when you don't have hope, you're a dangerous person. You're either going to hurt yourself or you're going to hurt somebody else. And a person with a group called Young Life came into a pool hall in Pittsburgh. And I had the first adult in my life think I had something worth. And if you feel worthless and somebody keeps coming back even though you reject them, I got the first glimpse of unconditional love. And I didn't believe in love at the time. I thought it was a myth. And he just kept loving me into change. And he saw he said, actually, you have some really great organizational skills. You just need to use them differently. And so I was part of a really, really bad group because I couldn't make it in school. And that's why God has a great sense of humor that I'm sitting up here today dealing with education. But 3 freshman years isn't too bad.
Consistency.
Yeah. But it's the power, and you can only relay hope by being in somebody's space and being there day in and day out, believing in when somebody believes in you, because hope is simply love in action. You're out there, as I said, we don't need more Facebook, we need more people in people's faces.
So I'm going to ask you this question.
His
One
turn?
more question? No. You're still your turn. What kind of hope does it give you seeing an alum leading the national organization?
If you'd have told me on my 80th birthday, we were able to get this guy to be the head of this movement, next to my wife and my kids and my grandchildren, I thank God that I never thought I'd get to see an alumni be the one to take it to the next level. And so, and I hope to be with them till I'm 100. I'm getting close.
So,
His turn?
well, we'll see. We'll see. I'll let y'all both take this one, whoever wants to go. So, Bill, you've seen the movement expand dramatically. And Ray, in your short term, but seems long because it was COVID time, it's expanded even more so. Tell us about kind of the network. And I know in San Antonio, we've really tried to be agile to our community. We've grown leaps and bounds in the last few years around schools, but also doing new initiatives and trying to really reach so many kids that really were affected by COVID and just the changes. So tell us kind of how CIS San Antonio fits into the network and what you see. Your experiences started from the south side of San Antonio, and now you see the United States as a whole. So tell us both, whoever wants to take that question, like what that's like.
Yeah, I'll take it first. I remember being afraid of a lot of things growing up, and one of the things that I was afraid of when I was 18 and had to go to California was getting on an airplane for the very first time. And Mrs. Reyes, I think you're the only person I knew who actually been on an airplane. You were at Wisconsin, and that was really impressive to me. So I always needed your help. But now I'm on a plane just about every week. And I will say, the further away I get from home, the more home starts to feel like every place. And the reason I say that is because if you were to ask me at the beginning of this work 4 years ago to today, one, because schools were shutting down at the same time I was joining the organization, I was in this crisis about whether we had a future. Was communities and schools going to continue to exist? And I was afraid I'd be the president of the organization at a time we had to turn the lights out because everybody was going back into home and school was not the place that folks were at. But I've now sort of thought about how critical COVID was to really waking up a lot of the consciousness around why our work is more important than it ever has been. And so when I joined the organization in 2020, we were in 2,500 schools in about 25 states. Today, we're not in 2,500 schools, we're in 3,700. We're growing faster than we ever have, and we're adding 4 or 5 other states. And here's the reason why, and this is how it relates to San Antonio. We have superintendents here who are in the room. It is by a large distance the hardest job in the country right now. If you are the leader of a school district, not only did you have to deal with the impacts of the pandemic, you've got shortages of funding because the federal funds are running low. You've got school closures, maybe declining enrollment. You've got school board meetings that all of a sudden have 100, 200 people showing up around this issue of education. And it is in that midst that I think superintendents are asking themselves the question. From my travels to West Virginia or urban Chicago or Atlanta or rural Appalachia, that they're trying to solve for one important thing inside schools. And CIS would not exist if this wasn't true. Our demand wouldn't be stronger if this was not true. That the impact of poverty and the increasing need that students are coming into schools with adult-sized problems is making it so that superintendents have to figure out how to answer this question of whether they can design the support systems inside schools. And some of them are choosing, maybe we can do this on our own, or maybe we can rely on an organization that has track record, credibility, data systems, helps understand this public-private partnership. Part of the luncheon is to ensure that when we go to superintendents and we tell them we're here to help solve for this problem, that we do it at a lower cost that's sustainable with all these ups and downs. And what's really incredible about CIS San Antonio specifically is what is learned here does not stay here at CIS of San Antonio. So when I was visiting the last several days, we've got site coordinators at Haven for Hope. We've got site coordinators on community college campuses. We've got staff members who understand that you can't just have a site coordinator in schools, you have to go through re-engagement processes where site coordinators are actually finding the students who are not showing up at school for attendance reasons. All of these things that we want to do, these are things that we're learning here in San Antonio. And I never thought I would say this, but it's quite special to have 16, 17 school districts in one place. I know we sometimes wonder why, and for at least the purposes of innovation and trying new things, with 16, 17 school districts, CIS of San Antonio is trying really innovative things to get to students, to build relationships, to connect them to opportunity, to remove barriers. And whether it's around our mental health supports, next level with the partnership, these are the kinds of innovations that CIS of San Antonio is teaching the rest of the network as this demand is increasing all across the country. And so kudos to San Antonio and this community of support that's here in this room that has taught this movement a lot of new tricks on how to meet student need.
I have one last question, Bill.
Uh-oh.
We have a community of supporters here who don't get to see you very often. You've been able to explain CIS to many people through the years. What would you like to say to our community here and how they support and why it makes sense?
I think it just makes sense to give all your money to us. For years, nobody really understood what this was all about. And I think one of the major, and there's been a number of inflection points along the way, and probably the one, we wouldn't be sitting here if it hadn't gone well. there's been a few of those, but this one really was. We had a vision when we started this, and I know it sounds wild, but after I got my degree in 11 years in Harlem in streetology, hanging out 101, relationships 303. But I learned from the streets up, and I knew that schools had fallen into a vacuum that was created by the beginning of the breakdown of community. The village that was raising the child I saw falling apart. And I saw schools fall in, and I saw schools were starting to be asked to be mother, father, sister, brother, social worker, hall guard. And I said, no wonder these kids are falling out. And also they were looking at it through the lens of content rather than through the lens of poverty. And I've spent the last 40-some years trying to convince people from the Hill and from the Wall Streets and all the other places I've hung out that you have to look at it through that lens. We need to free our teachers up to be teachers and the principal to be the principal and be there as a community surrounding the hub that they have to take care of. Because if we don't turn off the faucet of the schools, we'll be bailing out the basement of the community forever. So I found out we wrote a 100-year plan in 1971 in a storefront in Harlem. People thought we were crazy, but I said, change doesn't happen in 2, 3, or 4 years like the political forces or foundations want. It's a long-term deal to make change. So we knew we wouldn't finish it, but the big goal was to affect policy that all kids could be helped. So in the 80s, we started really, really growing fast, too fast, actually. It's one of the problems of having somebody with ADD, ADHD, and PTSD running the place. So we're growing, but we were big enough that I felt we could, how do you affect policy? And they said, well, you got to have cumulative data because you're a decentralized system. And you have to have a longitudinal study. So I figured those two words were big enough to cost a hell of a lot of money. And sure enough, the cumulative was more than my entire budget nationally. So I said it was early 90s, the technology was just booming, and it's important you really understand the context of this. I spent 1 year. They told me, you got to get to a technology company. They're the only ones that could do this for you. So I spent a year every few weeks flying across the country, working my way up to where I finally got to meet the founder, Mr. Mortgage, and then Mr. Chambers had come over from, I guess it was IBM. And I walked in the room, the people who were the foundation people said, you got 15 minutes with them. And I said, well, just send me the check. I don't need to meet with you. They're nice people, I'm sure. This was transformational, and to me, this is the way the universe works to give you I was on a hotspot because they came in, they were having a bad day, and they said, what is this meeting about? And they said, well, this is this charity we were telling you about. Well, why are you wasting our time? You're the charity people. And I said, this isn't going well. And so I said, look, I only have 15 minutes. Let me just say something. This is not a charity. I believe in charity. My wife's a minister. We believe in giving to the least, the last, the lost, the left out. But we need to deal with institutional change, too. And I want to tell you today, this is a business deal. And I told them in 17 years, you aren't going to have a workforce because your future workforce is dropping out of school at a 50% rate. So this is, if we work together on this, we can make a change. And you aren't going to bridge the digital divide. You're going to increase the digital divide if only some kids get to know the new technology and the new economics. Well, they closed the door, it got a little heated. And the meeting went longer. And they asked me a question that they later told me was the thing that got them. They said, what makes you different? And this is why I believe in a power greater than myself, because I didn't know what a router was. I mean, I would hardly do upload, download, or reload. But that was kind of the vocabulary. And they said, what do you mean? We have the router. And it got a little testy. And I said, yeah, you're going to change how we collect, organize, and disseminate information, but you aren't going to do it without our relational router. Because the only way we're going to free these teachers up to be teachers and the principals and build community around the school is if they have a router that is there knowing the kids by name, knowing which kids, like our daughter's a nurse, that in triage you have to know which kids just need a hug or food or clothing or shelter, and there's other kids that are gang banging and shooting people and shooting drugs. You have to be there in the community, knowing. During the pandemic, Arnie Duncan's on our board, and we were having conversations that we need to prepare coming out of this. The reason we're going to come out stronger is no war's won without an infantry. Those site coordinators, those routers. The good news, and it could go 4 hours longer on this answer, they left that meeting, turned around and said, the problem with this guy is he doesn't know how to ask for enough money. Only happened once in my lifetime. But we were able to do that to get to Longitudinal 2, and now we're the most evaluated nonprofit in the world.
Thank you. So, in transition, as we're ending, I think this fits with what you're talking about. You talk about, it's the future. Sometimes people don't see the future. They don't see the end result. And our community has been by our side, coming to our luncheons, supporting us in so many different ways. And so, Bill, your legacy has always been about the people. It's not been about the accolades that are listed through that bio. And so we have a video, and it's just a very short video of just a touch of what giving hope to someone and giving opportunity does, and what it does for our future and for our community. And so this is our last video.
What do you think of when you see this photo of yourself?
Oh my goodness. I just think of how excited I was to be growing up.
I was president of the Honor Society. I look at this photo and I see high school Adriana was always prepared.
And this photo, yeah. When I look at this photo, I really think back to all the people that really helped me.
I was 12 years old when I joined Communities and Schools of San Antonio.
I was 16 when I joined Communities and Schools San Antonio.
I was 15 years old when I joined CIS of San Antonio.
I never saw college in my future because my parents only went to 1st and 2nd grade in Mexico. So as a little girl, I would pass by Our Lady of the Lake University, and like many other kids, I would think of it as a castle. I knew that I liked learning, but I didn't know really what college was.
None of my family members have gone to college. My dad and my mom, the highest level of education they got was a high school education.
As a pre-teenager, I was very much a follower. I wanted to be part of everything with everybody else. I didn't really know where my direction was or what I wanted to do.
My high school counselor was insistent that I attend a community college and that a 2-year degree was going to be okay. But I asked, isn't there more? The unique opportunities that I got from Communities and Schools San Antonio included touring college campuses. I had never toured a college campus, so I think that's why it's so important to have Communities and Schools open that door for you. It's almost surreal now to think that I have a PhD from the University of Texas at Austin.
CIS of San Antonio exposed me to a lot of different opportunities I didn't know. A lot of it was internships, mentorship, and even college readiness.
Being part of CIS of San Antonio really helped me find more friends, find people that I could be part of and not feel like I was cast out. Everybody was welcome in the office. It was a very safe space.
I was surrounded by a community that believed in me and that for the first time said, you can do this and we will help. Now I teach at Our Lady of the Lake University. I am an associate professor of marketing. I also do this thing called City Council. I serve as a City Council representative for District 4. I feel really confident in that the high school me would be very proud of the current me.
I was able to go to college. I was able to go to university. I currently work for Councilman John Courage. I get to put forward, opportunities for students, for people of San Antonio to improve their lives. 15-year-old me, I wouldn't believe what I'm seeing right now because I really didn't think I would go this far.
The support that I received as a young girl really helped me want to be that person for somebody else. Now, as a professional, I work for Communities and Schools of San Antonio as a site coordinator, so I work with a caseload of students to provide them support, to have them understand that they can accomplish something and really start to see it in themselves and start to feel empowered. It's really heartwarming. If 11-year-old me could see where I am today and the person I am today, I think she would be inspired to continue going and not give up.
Communities and Schools San Antonio gave me the confidence to succeed in anything that I put my mind to.
CIS San Antonio gave me the opportunity to change my life.
CIS of San Antonio gave 11-year-old me belonging.